Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And today we're going to talk about startups and founders and VC again. We've been doing this series together. And by the way, for those here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. Lori is one of my teammates. And Lori and I have been talking about uh, uh, perspectives on being a VC, on being an investor. So, Lori, I'll turn it over to you for today.
Yeah, so thanks, Roy. Love being here, love chatting with you, hearing what you have to say. So, something that we talk about all the time is that the very best founders get their pick of which investors invest in them. And so, as far as our side of the table, as a VC, what is the best way to convince or sell a founder to actually take my money?
Yeah, the I think that this question of in any business relationship of sort of who is selling who is it varies a lot and can be very surprising. There are a lot of VCs who think that they're in the game of founders selling them, and that can be the case. But then for the founders they truly want, they're in the business of selling the founder. And then figuring out when to do what is the first kind of difficult part. And the first thing I just say is for us, just one data point, as you know, we see the founder as our potential customer. And so while it's very difficult to do with the enormous number of founders who we may reach out to or who may reach out to us, we want to try to be in the stance of persuading everybody from the beginning that we would be a good partner. And then I'd say that then it just turns into the same way if a founder came to you and said, "Hey, I've got a product in a market. How do I convince the customer to take my product?" Well, in our case, the money is the product. And so how do you convince them? And I'd say it varies a lot depending on the stage you're in. So very different if you're a late stage VC. I mean, I have a friend who's a late stage VC who says, "My value add is I won't call you." And what he means by that is by that point, the founders kind of may know what they're doing. They may not want active assistance of somebody on their board. And so that may be differentiating at that stage. At our stage, we believe that founders often want a certain form of active support, whether that's customer introductions or, insights on how to tell their story in the public, fundraising. It's usually for the things that are one-way doors for founders in the beginning, because a lot of things in the beginning of a startup you can solve with trial and error. Like you goofed, no big deal. Other firms have different perspectives, but in
Wait,
our
actually, before we move on, though, how do you define a one-way door? I think that that's a really important
oh yeah,
concept
good
to
question.
lay out.
Yeah. So in the life of a startup, and one of the best writers on this is Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup and has this great post, Don't Launch, where he talks about not ever needing to have a launch day. But, the interesting thing there to me is, in addition to that tactical question or strategic question, whatever, is the whole concept of one-way doors. Of if you can avoid walking through a one-way door, which is to say a choice that you can't unmake. If you got it wrong, you got to be sure to get it really right. And and so a lot of what we end up doing in our support for founders is saying, well, like, I don't know, I can give you my opinion, but why don't you just try it? Because that is a two-way door. If you try it and it doesn't work, it's fine.
You can
Some things are
experiment.
one-way doors. The first time you show up in public, it's a one-way door. If anybody notices, I guess I'd say press, maybe in that case. An introduction to a particularly valuable partner. Like you can only get one, one first chance at a first impression with the VC firm of your dreams. And I'm exaggerating a little because maybe they don't notice and then you get another shot. But, some things are one-way doors. But the point of it is just that we have a particular point of view given our stage and given the founders who we want to work with. If we were in a different geography, it might be totally different. We might be able to, how do I convince a founder to take my money is offer it to them, might be the only thing we had to do in a different geography. It just depends. But
Right.
where we work, which is North America, early stage, we think we need to have a very different point of view. And so I'll just say one last thing and then ask any questions, which is the kind of core practice is honest look at the strategy of where you want to play, like what stage or what geography or what industry. If you're a deep tech VC, it might be easier. And then a hypothesis about how you differentiate yourself from that person's other alternatives, which could be awareness and reputation. I mean, some firms, it's just that they're known for being winners. They don't need to do anything else. By the time they do often do other things, but they don't need to. And yeah, just trying to honestly diagnose it. And it's really important to get data on it that isn't just what your own team thinks, because I can't tell you how many teams have convinced themselves. They're like, whoa, what we really need to do is blank because the founder told us that. It's like, no, but people don't tell you the truth. So you got to get triangulate a lot of sources of outside perspective and be very skeptical about yourself.
What do you think are the most valuable data sources for that?
Great question. It's founders, it's members of your target market who you have no vested interest with and a close enough relationship that they'll be honest. So a founder who passed on working with you and you built a relationship with anyway that turned out to have really good judgment. A founder who is in a related enough domain that they get it about what you do, but would never be able to pitch you, that's a person who might get it. And I never really listened to their advice, just in the sense that they may not know the answer, but they may be able to give you data on what worked. Like, when we said this, do you care? What are the things we said you did care about? It's more the same way you do any customer interview, is you're not listening to what the customer tells you to do with the product. Because, the old line about, like, if I'd listened to my customers, the Henry Ford thing, I'd have built a faster horse. But you do listen to what they value. And also, the other thing I just say is the other good data point is silence, which is to say, if you put out a bunch of stuff about something you think is really important and nobody ever talks to you about it, not even pandering to you, to say, like, people often reach out to us and they're like, we loved your operating manual. It's like, well, maybe they loved it. Maybe they're pandering to us because we know we're proud of it.
At least they found it, right?
But at least they found it. Well, sure, but that's more a data point about them than it is a data point on their opinion about us. But if you're trumpeting something a lot and nobody seems to care, that's a big data point too. It's the dogs aren't barking thing, is the line some people have said. What do you think?
I mean, I think that we use NPS, right, to find out what our founders think about us. And I find that to be a really valuable outlet because so many founders mask what they think when they talk to VCs directly because of the power imbalance, right? NPS gives an anonymous way to do it, where, to me, a lot of the comments, not the ratings, but the written comments, taught me so much about what founders care and don't care about. And to your point about silence, things that maybe I thought would be important didn't come up a single time. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to agree. I have a thought once you're finished, but keep going.
Yeah. And I think also talking to folks about kind of reputation helps too. And that comes to mind because obviously Founders Choice came out recently, a lot of chatter around what VCs are known for. And finding out what VCs are known for gets you like the most kind of high level, far away from the details look at how people see you. And so that's kind of the opposite, taking it all the way of like, for us, for example, when people think of Bloomberg Beta, what do they think of? It might be really different than how we think of ourselves.
Totally. I mean, the zoom out and market research, we've commissioned studies of unaided awareness, for example, and for customers, not founders, Bloomberg Beta and what used to be called Google Ventures ranked so much more highly than lots of other firms because they just recognize the corporate name. They never heard of Benchmark. They just don't know what these firms are. Sequoia is like an HR provider too, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'd say is it is very valuable to look at your current customers, especially the ones who are the role models for the kind of customers you want to have. So in that sense, the verbatims from NPS surveys, and you can use tools like Avalanche, that we back to assess those, can be really helpful. It's really important to look at the other type of error. So like once YC tweeted that they did this thing of like, we looked at the most successful blah, blah, blah to see, what we thought of our decision-making process. Like, yeah, but what about the most successful companies you rejected from YC? That's the most valuable data source. And so when we look at the ones, that's in that case about their decision-making, but the founders who ended up being wildly successful who rejected us, those are the ones I most care about what they think, because those are the ones we wish we'd gotten.
Right. And I think on that note, something that we do is hold ourselves accountable to that by looking at that on almost a quarterly basis, and kind of really digging in and having a discussion about what happened.
Yeah, there's a regular practice part of all this too, which is to say some strategies are not about that one huge insight. They can be. A lot of times it's refinement, it's iteration, and we try to do both. But the other thing I just say is I think our core secret is we just give a shit. Is we actually really just want to convince founders to take our money. And I remember thanking the first few founders who accepted our money. I was literally like, God, what a fucking bet they're taking on us. And I felt really grateful to them, and I still do. So yeah, I mean, some of it is just caring. That's a big part of it.
100%. So I have one last question that I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
and it's about this idea of value adds. And I think of value adds as like a list, a checklist of kind of what do you provide? Do you think that that is an important list to have in order to give founders kind of the check boxes
It
of what you
depends.
can
I mean,
do?
sure. I kind of think of that in customer language as the functional benefits versus the emotional benefits of a product. Like those are
Hmm.
some of the functional benefits, but there are also emotional benefits. Like I just trust these people, or my friend Lori said, well, Lori, in your case, you're a VC, but my friend Lori's friend, who is a founder, told me that I should take their money. Like that, a lot of that stuff just isn't encapsulated in a rational list. And that's okay too. And there is, of course, a relationship between the delivery of quality of service, value add, and the sort of the back of the funnel and the sales choice of whether they agree to take your money. They're related. One drives the other. That's why we start at the back of the funnel trying to deliver value. But also, they're also separate because, somebody had a bad meeting with you in, 2017, and they complained to their friend, and then they don't take your money. Like that has nothing to do with value add. It's just,
Right.
and the positive version of that too, which is like, hey, I really like what Lori's been saying on Twitter. Like I just really like to talk to her more. That all of that. And so, but I think that the method there is think about it like you're just doing regular customer sales. And so what you just described, I would just translate into functional benefits.
Right. And
How
then
long does the printer last before it breaks? Not how do I feel bragging to my friend that I have an HP or whatever.
yeah, no, 100%. And I guess it also poses the opposite question of how many founders did we not convince appropriately because of value adds, right? Like, how often does that happen?
Totally. Totally. I mean, I think, and I think that by the time you get to the part of the funnel where you're aware of the fact that they've rejected you, that's really valuable, but it's a small subset. The biggest ones I worry about are the ones who we never convinced to take our money because they've never heard of us, or they've heard of us and heard something bad, and therefore we never hear of them. Like those are the ones that are kind of, in a way, the where the data is hiding. Maybe we've talked about this joke before about the economists and the light. Does that ring a bell?
No. So tell the joke.
It's an economist joke, so it's not very funny. But an economist drops his keys, or her keys, their keys. I think the joke was long enough ago that it was sexist, in a parking lot. And there's only one, at night, and there's only like one lamppost with a light in the parking lot. And somebody comes by and they see the economist searching under the light, looking for their keys. And like, oh, what's happening? Oh, I'm looking for my keys. Where'd you drop them? All the way over there on the other side of the parking lot. Why are you looking over here? Because this is where the light is. And the point is that we tend to focus on the things we can get data about, even if they're less important than the things we can't get data about. When the answer might have been, go stand in the dark side of the parking lot for an hour until your eyes adjust to the darkness and then look for it. And that's just harder to do. So anyway, end of thought.
No, 100%. And it's a good reminder that when we only look in the light, we're really staying in our bubble and our network and our circles. And what people outside of our circles think of us can often be really telling if they
Find
have
the
an
people who will
opinion.
tell you your baby is ugly,
Yes, yes. I think that's a
not
great note
IRL.
to end on.
Right. All right. Well, to be continued. And for folks, again, watching for the first time, the reason we say this is not advice is we're not telling you what you should do. Most advice is autobiographical. Here we're sharing our story, so that we can convince others to either be inspired by it, or we want them to live vicariously with some experiment. There's lots of ways I wish we'd convinced founders, and I don't think we've really cracked the marketing nut yet on what we do. So we're still trying to figure it out. And yeah, so that's why it's not advice, and to be continued.
Awesome.
Thanks, Lori.